Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast, where I have Nat Koko from Willow's Branding joining me today. Now, it's great to get someone else other than an Army person or an ex-Army person on board. So, Nat, welcome to MMFB.
Thanks, buddy. It's cracking.
Nice to chat today. Now we've sort of swum in the same circles through business networking groups and touch base and lately, we've been talking a lot more about the Veteran Community Business Chamber and supporting some of the work there. But let's go right back to the start of your military journey. And can you share with us, like, what made you join and where did you join from and what did you do? And just so that, introduce us to Nat's story with the Navy.
Yeah, cool. Well, it starts way back before I could even remember until a memory came up. So I was about 11 years old, and in school, like, you do like all these storybooks and things like that. And I don't remember what the storybook was about, but at the back it said about the author. And at the back of the book, it had like a little photo of me in my school uniform, like sitting all like up and straight. And it said I said that I wanted to be, I think, something along the lines of a personal trainer for the military or something like that. Now, that memory kind of skips, like, I don't recall writing that, but I clearly wrote that and put that in the book. So that kind of sat there for a little bit. And then it wasn't until I think it was about 15, 16, we did a day tour in Brisbane on one of the ships and had a bit of a tour. Again, that kind of lapsed my memory as well of doing that per se. Like, it didn't link back to that story from when I was 11. And so I started going through the process of applying to be in the Navy. For me, the Navy was something that, being on the water, just, it feels like at home for me. So that kind of is why the Navy. So I don't need to sleep in the dirt like you guys. So just have a little dig there.
Love the dirt.
Yeah. So I went through the process in end of year 10 and start of year 11 and started to go through that process to get ready to join the Navy. So,
well, that's pretty early, like year 10 or 11, I was, barely grown up enough to, like, I don't know, but like literally I was nowhere near mature enough to join the military services at that age. Like, it's funny you mentioned about the 11-year-old, because I actually found myself, I found a little book, like a little picture book called My Adventures in World War II that I did when I was 11.
Oh.
And then I went to join the military when I was about 18, a little bit older, but unfortunately my alternate lifestyle at the time probably wasn't going to, be conducive to the military ethic at that time. And I didn't join until I was 30. So,
wow.
17-year-old young woman or so-ish.
Pardon?
17 or so when you joined, 17, 18?
Yeah, so I joined just a couple of months after turning 18.
Yeah, wow. And what was that shift like? Because which part of the world did you grow up in?
Well, I'm a bit of a gypsy, so no place for longer than 4 years, and that kind of still stands true. So that kind of links to moving around with the military as well. What was your question again, Pete? I've got lost.
Yeah. So which part of the world did you come from to make the shift into the Navy?
Gotcha. So where I reside now, Fraser Coast in Hervey Bay. So that's where I was at the time before going down to Victoria at the age of 18, pretty much, 4 months after finishing school. So I went down there with like shorts and singlets because that's all I kind of owned into the Victorian weather. So thank goodness they provided the uniforms and even the shoes and the socks and everything that you can name like that. So they got me prepared for the cold weather.
I can imagine. And how many years did you do?
So I did just 4.5 years, Pete.
Yeah. So that's quite a long time, and a really, powerful time in your life to form, a lot of your ideas around the world and experiences. Like, look, I don't know much about the Navy, but is there ship time in there? Do you get to go sail the blue seas?
That's a really picturesque way to explain it. But the time that I had, the first 18 months I spent training because I was in a technical role. So that journey was spent a lot of time in Cerberus back in 2009, 2010. So from there was then the posting choices of I think there was Cairns, Sydney, and Perth, and I'd never been to Perth before, so I was posted over there for my first posting. It was a bit of a funny story as to why I chose Perth. I think it was just didn't like Sydney. Cairns was too hot, and yeah, never been to Western Australia. So that's kind of what triggered going over there. And then I was posted to a ship pretty quickly. So my first warship was HMS Arunta 151. So it's definitely not like a cruise ship, and things are a little bit different now. I've not been on one for a long time, but so yeah, I guess the journey of going on there, my first encounter of going onto a ship, because of course they stir shit with the new people, was that go get a bucket of steam or go get a left-handed screwdriver, and and I was just like, can't do that for you. And so it was just like being in a category with all men was definitely a different experience as well.
What was the population mix, gender mix on the ship?
Oh, you're testing the waters now, but I think out of where I was, so the mess I slept in was like 15 women, but the stokers, I think, I don't know, there'd be like 35 men to 2 women or something like that.
Yeah. So that was your trade? Was it a stoker?
Yeah, marine technician at the time.
Does that mean like an engine mechanic? Is that
yeah,
what that is?
Like fix all the nuts and bolts, and that's probably just like the stokers are probably listening to it right now and be like, oh, that's not exactly what we do, but keep the ships running in that respect, like the engines and the shitter systems, keeping the laundry intact, the generators, reverse osmosis, like so changing seawater into drinkable water as well. So
gotcha. So one of these roles is down in the heart of the ship, not necessarily sitting on the sun deck, getting a tan on top like the rest of the Navy.
No, not like the greenies.
So like okay, we've got a young woman now that's that's joined the military in Perth. I love the decision making of youth. Don't like Sydney, Kansas too hot. Perth seems like a good fit. Let's just do that.
Just wing it.
No, I love it. My only experience with Navy, apart from a few visits to ships on while they're in port, was I had the dubious pleasure of being part of embarked forces on HMAS Kanimbla for what's called an exercise talisman saver.
Oh, yeah.
And being part of an embarked forces company on one of those old fruit carrying ships was so super not cool, because I think it was a 16 or 17 days at sea.
Is that all?
The first 11 or 12 days we did submarine evasion. Now, if you're embarked forces, i.e. an army guy on a Navy ship, you don't really have that big a role in submarine evasion. So we were basically locked in, not locked, but stuck into the bowels of the ship in, I think it was sea state 4 or 5, and I don't even really know what that means, but it was, you could not walk in a straight line on the ship, up, down, left, right. It was, anyway, after
walking on the ceiling.
Was that sorry?
Walking on the bulkheads.
I remember the first day, being a young platoon commander, I had all these activities and, that I'd get the soldiers to do for the next sort of 15, 16 days, like we'll get some training in, and, being the young thrusting leader that I was. But I think after the first day, I was just like, right, and everyone just please not get in trouble for 10 days, and I'll see you in 10 days. And let's just
did you have your head in a bucket of throwing up the whole time, or?
I personally wasn't sick, but the 100 of us that were in the size of a quarter of a basketball court stacked 4 bunks deep, I reckon there was at least 50 people sick on that ship. So it wasn't pleasant. Anyway, good old Pongos, Army boys and girls on ships. So 4.5 years or so, you do your time, and you ended up transitioning out of the military, not necessarily under your control or choice.
No, so my career was cut short due to medical conditions, which was unfortunate. Through the process of had an accident on a warship. So there's more to the story, but to keep it at that, basically, that turned into being medically discharged for that reason. And it's interesting, Pete, because I did have an opportunity or scope to stay in, but not going to sea and and being offered a promotion in the role that I was in. But from a hindsight of the perspective of the age that I'm at now compared to back then, being promoted, not having enough sea time and staying in and not going to sea just didn't make sense for me personally at the age of, in my early 20s. So in that respect, there's that catch 22. I could have stayed into a certain period of time, but it would have been limiting in those career choices and things like that. So I graciously took on board the advice and went down the path of transitioning out to a civilian.
It's an interesting time, mate, because even though 4.5 years doesn't seem like a long time, it's effectively half of your adulthood, or a massive component in terms of determining how much do you feel that Navy experience changed you for better or worse moving into into your 20s as a civilian.
Definitely not in my 20s anymore, but in the early stages of transitioning, I think the fact that from such a young age, from 11 or even younger, having that sense of, I was brought up in a strict household as well, so that helps. I think it carries through into being a civilian and seeing the chaos of the civilian world. And I'm not saying it's completely like that, but from my perspective, the structure, where to be if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late, and all those sorts of things, like those things still carry through to me today. And so I think, that military mindset, like we're a weird bunch of fuckers really, aren't we? Like, who's crazy enough to do that stuff? Well, we are, and it seems normal. So that's been a challenge being a civilian again.
It's interesting you say that, because it is a unique group of people that leave home, leave their friends, and go do something that is because you really, even if you've got a partner or a family, you do join the military by yourself. Obviously with those with partners and families, bring them along for the journey, but it's something that, for the majority of people who are single, leaving home, leaving your family, leaving your friends, and then going into this new world with, adventure and risk and excitement and danger. It's a really strange thing when you get out and then go back to that world and you see the lack of rigidity and structure and just the sort of freestyle manner
of how we see it.
Yeah, in line.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that talking about risk of like when you join, there's that risk of doing it. I think I had just turned 18 when I joined. And so it wasn't a risk. I just did it. Like there's no thought of risk. There's no thought of the dangers. There's no thought of that sort of process at the time. And even now, like I do love adrenaline and things like that. So like, shooting a rifle is just like sick, right? Like I only got gel blasters now, but that kind of mindset, I don't know if it's scary or risky. It's just something that you do and you enjoy it, and you make a different group of your oppos or your mates, and some of them stay with you. And if you ever run into them, or even if someone you've not served with, there's definitely an instant rapport that comes with that. And transitioning that into, say, like civilian life and now into business, that's another fascinating journey to explore.
I want to get to the business bit very shortly, but I just want to unpack a little bit about transition, because one of the things I've been really thinking about lately is friendships and colleagues and professional relationships, both in the military and then outside of the military. Okay. And the fact that we've only been really connected in the last maybe year or two. However, because you were an ADF member, Australian Defence Force member, because you served, that's an instant connection and a bond that we can hold quite dearly, despite everything else that's different about us. I think one of the things with military is you always have your next course, your next posting, your next ship or unit, and you basically get hand-fed a new group of mates. And then you go and meet your new mates and you have a great time with them, and then then it's on to the next one, next deployment, next course, next unit, next ship. And we keep getting these new groups of mates. And it's really, some of my best friends, I don't think my wife partner's ever met before. She probably never even heard their name. But when I connect with them, it's super powerful. But when you leave, your mates keep moving on to the next course, the next ship, but you get sort of left in a point where it's not spoon-fed to you anymore. Did you have how was your transition experience? Was it positive or was it rough? Because not everyone has bad transitions.
I think it was a bit of a combination for both. Like, the terms that I left on were, so when I say not on my terms, it wasn't the way I had, saw myself leaving. I was going to be a lifer. So I thought. So I guess that was, one of the challenging things to work through. And there's a term that they use for it is, can't come to mind, but basically the challenge of the actual challenge of leaving was difficult because of that. I guess you could say at the time, the identity that I had attached to being in the military. So that was really challenging and even to this day, I still work through that kind of thing. And, there's a part of me that's really still connected to that way of life. And so, bringing that into the now, the benefits of leaving is that I get to serve my country and my people in a different way and in a very different way from what I had thought about when I was, 16, 17, 18 and going through that process of joining. So now I get to speak to more and more people and connect with people more frequently. So, that's the benefit of having a civilian life where there's a lot more consistency in the people that you can choose to surround yourself. But it wasn't initially like that when I left. It was, the conditions were a little bit different. But that's where I've come to now.
I want to give an amen out there to still serving. It's something that, for those with the military mindset, you basically join to serve. There are personal reasons, of course, but I don't think you can go into that career or that workplace without some sense of service or attachment to greater good, which is really infused into every fibre of your being when you're in a ship or in a unit. So we've got a gap here because you're a successful entrepreneurial woman now. You've got a great business, Willow's branding, but did you have entrepreneurial or small business inclination from a young age, or where did that spark come from?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate in the sense that I had family members in business throughout that time. And I think about the age of 7, I was selling my plaster of Paris to my neighbors, from my Christmas presents, and then selling it to them and them obliging to, purchase it. So, I guess in essence, yes, that it's definitely been there. It's an area that I've definitely wanted to explore for a long time. And I only really started just a couple of years ago. So it's definitely been ingrained. And I actually started my own clothing. My sister and I started our own clothing brand because I didn't want to pay retail prices for that. So that in itself is, again, that entrepreneurial mindset where it's like, well, I can do this better. So I'm going to go down that path. So yeah, definitely it's been there, and the spark or the flame started to show a couple of years ago when I started to own the fact that this is what I was going to explore with my life now.
One of the things that I like to unpack is, how business journeys get created. And a lot of people don't transition immediately from the military into a business. Did you work for a few years before you kicked Willows off, or was it something you kicked off straight out of serving?
No, so there's a lot of rehabilitation in between the leaving and now. So it's not something that I jumped straight into. In regards to the clothing brand sort of thing, yes, I did that to sort of keep myself from going insane. Something to do.
Yep. Now, so tell us about Willow's branding. It's you and your sister. Where did apart from, wanting to not pay retail, how did this thing change from being a hobby or a side gig into the thing that you're doing now? Because that's a big shift.
So I guess the transition or like the shift that happened from like the hobby state into going into sole trader and now, company proprietary limited. So back in 2019, my beautician, she's got her own brand, and her own brand and own messaging, and she was talking about these shirts and she needed more done and asked if I could do them because she knew that I did it. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I can do that. So it was just like, yep, no worries, I'll help you out. And then 10 shirts turned into 150. And I thought, holy shit, like, I only do this as a hobby, so to speak. So there was that. So still treating it as a hobby. And then I guess the real shift was in what year are we in? 2023.
23.
Yeah, I had to think about that. Yeah, so 2 years ago, I still was treating it as a hobby, even though I hired business coaches because I was doing something with my life. I still wasn't sure, and maybe still I'm not sure. But that was I don't know. It's been if I'm transitioning out of the military into civilian life, fine. And then going from hobby state into business. And like you said, like that is a bit of a shift. Like what makes a difference there? I'm going to start getting paid for what I do now rather than just doing it for, at the cost of the product. So it's definitely an eye opener, Pete.
Like you're someone, like, to be honest, my style is like, to be honest, pretty bland, white t-shirt, black cap. This, I wear that 90%. But you've actually got style and a bit of pizzazz, bit of nous about you. Was it this attachment to style and creativity that led you into this? And you were able to express any of that through your designs?
Yeah, I guess so. Like I've just reached across here. So like I take the compliment that I'm stylish, but I feel like I'm a pretty plain Jane most of the time. I think I do
anyone who knows Nat knows she's not like that. You've been far too humble. When you walk into a room, everybody knows you're in the room. And not just by your presence, but you're a cool chick.
Oh, sometimes I wear two different color shoes now. um so like are you asking if I'm like inspired by the process of being creative and putting that into designs, or like what's the essence there?
Yeah, look, so like you've got a way that you present yourself, and now you've gone into like clothing. Is
Gotcha.
being able to express that from a fashion perspective, because like for me, I wouldn't really know how to express my brand into the apparel part of our business. So do you enjoy that part of the fashion being creativity and getting into the things that people present themselves with?
Okay, yeah, I understand now. Well, I've never really said that I'm in the fashion industry, right? I normally just say I brand shit, but I've been taught to like say that, I support people through X, Y, and Z and expressing things like that. So I guess in that, the presentation of the fashion or the creativity, it's been a journey to be able to do that, like, wearing a pink headband and my mum made this jacket for me and we picked out the material and it's linen, so it's breathable. So there's definitely like that fashionable element there. And then what I guess the main part of the creativity that I like to explore with other people is what are other people looking to express and how can we as a team support that expression, and predominantly through a uniform, but it's not just a uniform, it's a representation of why someone started something in the first place. So I guess the creative process and the expression comes down to who we're working with at the time. And yes, we present ourselves a certain way. Like my sister is like, sometimes we look like twins in, I guess, our facial experience, expressions and, glasses and representation, but we're two totally different styles. Like she's like wearing like death metal shirts and covered in tattoos and things like that. And I guess that's her creative expression. And so we may not see it as a creative expression, whereas someone else does see that. And so where we're able to bring that creativity is understanding like, well, what does Pete want? How does Pete want to express himself? Well, he wants to present himself in X, Y, and Z, and that's how he feels comfortable. But that's your own creative expression.
Because I probably should have mentioned it earlier, but tell us about exactly what Willow's branding does to
Yep.
give our listeners context here.
Yeah. Okay. So we have an apparel branding consulting business. So we take our clients to their audience so they can be seen, heard, and felt in that. But I guess in like simple words is that we help our clients to bring their own representation in front of their audience. So like, on a Zoom, is their business name displayed where they want to be able to be easily identified? So I normally say brand shit, and I know it doesn't give what we do justice, but we ultimately help people be identified and seen in their exposure through headwear, streetwear, and workwear.
It's interesting because in my experience of the business journey, like a lot of people start off businesses very operationally focused. They're good at doing something, so they do that instead of somebody else for themselves, and they start a business. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh man, I've got to get some sales. So then they focus on developing a sales process to, get more conversion to do more things. But then after that, they're like, well, it's actually, I need more leads to get into more sales to sell more things.
Yep.
So we're moving to the left on the customer journey. But after we go through, getting good at our operations and getting good at our sales and then getting good at our marketing, we have this light bulb moment about our brand. And our brand really drives, our marketing presence and who we actually are. And then coming back into that, vision, mission, and values, brand becomes super important, sometimes a lot later in consideration than it should. But again, the ability to be able to now express who you are, not only in terms of, from a business perspective, but literally what you're wearing and the way you present yourself to the world. So like, tell us how do you go through the process, like for pulling my personal brand out of me and getting it on, to our new uniform, our new apparel set?
So there's a bit of a process that we take, Pete, which we continually craft and hone and adapt and change as we develop in our experience. And so the number one thing is that understanding, first of all, are we a good fit for, Pete and his brand to be seen? And that comes down to, do you care about what you're doing? In a real simple sense. And then we go through a process of like, we're not for everyone. And we work a little bit differently. And we've got this thing called like a sorcery component. So sorcery, in other words, is like a consultation, but sorcery sounds like a witchcraft here. Very opposite to military, right? So this sorcery component is to sit down with yourself and say, why did you start the business? And what's the importance of why you think you may want to be exploring even wearing your brand for one? Like, why is it important now? And do you see the value? So we go through a process with our clients to understand what it is that they need and then be able to make recommendations and suggestions based off that, because you're busy, doing everything that you need to do. So it's allowing someone else and having the trust in one another to say, these are our recommendations based on what you've said, and these are our solutions for you. So
it's not just a matter of like flicking you an email with my logo on a, some kind of graphics and then pasting it onto a t-shirt and away we go.
Yeah, so we're not a print on demand company where though they have their places, but if you're wanting guidance of saying you buy it, like as an example of like saying, hey, you say, hey, I want this on a t-shirt and I send you a snow jacket. Well, you might be working in a flammable area that's really hot and the snow jacket's not going to be suitable for you, Pete. So it's like, well, we didn't know the information because we didn't ask. So it can come down to as simple as like, where are the uniforms being worn? And it's not always necessarily diving into like the deep and meaningful stuff, but it's definitely there to make the connection of like, you're representing yourself and that's where you want to wear it.
Yeah.
Or I send you like a a toddler's t-shirt with your logo on and be like, that's not what I asked for. I'm like, well, you just asked for a logo on a shirt, mate. Like, you didn't say what you wanted. And so that's where the sorcery of understanding your needs come into play.
Yeah, no, I like it because, for me, it comes back down to being able to be like proud of who you are. I find that going through the business experience, particularly when you start something yourself, there's a level of worthiness that we have to get to in terms of being able to be proud of some words that we are and be proud of our brand. Like, I swear if I ever, my very first couple of years of business, if anyone said you're an entrepreneur, it'd be like, I'd be embarrassed. I'm like, God, that sounds like such a wanker to even like think of me associated with that word. Here we are down the track. We've started many businesses, and it's just our thing now.
Yeah.
And I think your branding and the way you wear your brand is another kind of worthiness, to just be out there and proud of the great work you're doing in business.
Yeah, and like if I can just share a quick example with you, is that okay?
Yeah, please, please.
Sweet. So we did this collaboration in 2021 and led into 2022 with a film director, a young film director, and we did this collaboration where we'd make some products for her and she would do some filming. And it wasn't until we went through the process of saying, like, why did you start the business and what are you wanting to achieve, that we were able to present a solution with and for her where she didn't feel like it was just a logo anymore, she felt connected to why she was doing it. And then, her film crew and things like that, and having like a little simple message that connect and make it more approachable for, like, when they're at an event, that people can come up and talk to them saying, we're here to share your story. And so like those little things come down to, it became more than just a t-shirt for her now. Like, she became reconnected with that message and felt really proud to wear it.
Look, I think it's such a cool story, and that again, presentation, that sense of connection, sense of identity. We used to wear. We were talking about a little bit earlier the military uniforms that we used to wear. Such a part of our identity and who we felt we are, and actually who that identity capture at the time is really significant. And for me now, like, my personal identity again revolves around t-shirts and caps, and this is really who I'm comfortable with, in terms of my space and presenting myself.
That's great.
And it's interesting in business about having that. There's a place for suits and ties and protective wear, but being able to find an identity that matches who you are, particularly from your positioning and style perspective as a business. And for in our business, my co-founder, Matt Mosley, it is just a reflection of our personalities, and to pretend to be someone that we're not by what we're wearing and the way that we express ourselves in our attire would be like a falsehood in terms of the expectation, what they get out of our services.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to come back to the piece around words and language and uniform, and particularly the identifying with words. I mentioned a little bit about entrepreneurship before. Can we just unpack this word veteran a little? Because it's a really quirky, kind of annoying word, because our grandparents are veterans, and you're in your 30s, and I'm slightly just above that, just a little bit.
You're only 33 now, aren't you, Pete?
But that's what I tell myself. But plus a little bit. But this word veteran, it's a funny word to connect with, isn't it? Tell me about your experience, with connecting now to that lifestyle that was, approximately 10 or so years ago, and your journey with bringing that life into this life, and how you feel about that word.
Yeah, it could be a little bit of a sore topic to talk about, but I'm happy to sort of dig into that a little bit. I think prior to, 6 months ago and to now, being called a veteran was a really hard pill to swallow, and not feeling deserving of, this is only my experience. I can't speak for other people, but being called a veteran, it's coming to terms to, the definition of what it is. In my mind, in my experience is like the veterans were back in the day in the trenches and going through that process and coming back, they were veterans. And I'm not taking away from anyone else's service. I want to be very, very clear there. But the term veteran, when leaving, and I think maybe especially at, certain ages or not fulfilling part of the journey or experience that maybe you had set out to do. And then being called a veteran is really hard to come to terms with. And saying, well, I'm not a veteran. I'm not worthy of it. I didn't do that service. So, being called a veteran in that respect can be or could be a challenging experience. And so to kind of go through that process to say, well, actually, I am a veteran, and I'm talking about the now, has actually shed some light, actually speaking to you, Pete, over the last, just under 2 years of meeting you and being really shy to say that I was even in the military to begin with, or hiding away the fact that I was in the military because I didn't want to be asked the questions, where did you serve and things like that. Like, it's a really personal thing that can be quite triggering for different people and leaving on different terms. So being called a veteran now, I'm coming to terms with it. It's like, well, yeah, I am a veteran. And is there a way that we can look at using the word veteran and reinvigorating what it is to have served and making that connection there? So if we were to break down maybe some of the negative connotations that we personally have with it or other people, and I know I'm not the only person who feels this way. Spoken to many veterans, and there's a similar kind of feeling and experience about it. And so maybe it's time to shift. Maybe it's time to shift that, shift the way we view it and honor it.
Yeah, I think it's such a personal and powerful moment. Like for me, it's like an intense relationship that sometimes when you break up with it, you still sort of bury it down into your past. And it can be quite emotional thinking about it at that time because it has such a massive effect on you, such a pivotal time in your life. For me, like I struggle with the word as well. Number one, because again, it's so linked to our grandparents in World War II that, marched down. And again, for you as I don't think you look at all like a classic veteran. You're a young woman, and I don't know, do you march on Anzac Day or wear medals or anything like that? Because it's not for me. That's just my personal choice. But a lot of people wouldn't sit if they spoke to you at the pub on Anzac Day. They'd be like, "Oh, really?"
Yeah, so I don't march on Anzac Day anymore, and my service medals that I do have, there's even like a barrier to wear them on Anzac Day.
Yeah.
Or to wear my veteran pin.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, Pete, no, I don't necessarily wear them, but I am pushing myself to acknowledge, and I do bring out my service medal on Anzac Day now and connect with it on a different level like that. And like, going to the pub on Anzac Day, yeah, no, generally the response is like, oh, shit, what? You were a stoker? You're a mechanical fitter? Yeah, I was a long time ago. Don't ask me to fix shit now. Like, I'll do it in my own house. But so yeah, like there's definitely a bit of a shock to people's systems. But once you start talking, I swear like a sailor, then it really comes out. Then it really starts. And then it's like, oh yeah, now we can see why.
back on board again.
So first appearances, not so much, but once you get me going, you can tell.
I think it's a really important thing, on Anzac Day when you see, particularly young women wearing medals on their left. It doesn't mean that they've accidentally got it on the wrong side and it belongs to their grandparents. It may just belong to their own service, particularly with what Australia's had to do over the last 10 and 20 years. Again, this word veteran, it's not a word that everyone's going to be comfortable with. But from my perspective, if you served at all, at any time, rank, experience, length of time, it doesn't matter. There was a time in your life where you decided to leave your family, leave your friends, and serve. And that in itself should be respected and acknowledged. And the problem with veteranness as well, talking about this stuff, is it's like money or fitness. Like there's always someone that's going to be a little bit more wary. So for me, I was a logistics officer. So, I wasn't a war fighter. I'm not the one that's out the front, searching for bombs and engaging with the enemy close, or, doing, close combat or anything like that. So there's always a sort of sense of, there's somebody better. But I think it's a really important time for us to sort of just acknowledge, those around us who have served, and just be comfortable that for a time and a place in our life, it was something that was really special to us. So having said that, there's a powerful connection between let's call ourselves ex-service people now, and its amazing propensity to do business. So, for example, if you find someone who's had this commitment in service and that has courage, respect, initiative, teamwork, these kind of values that are infused in us from the military, you get this stuff from a veteran business owner. Like you mentioned still serving a little bit earlier. I really am passionate about believing that one of the core essences of military mindset is this service and delivery of great product. Is this something that you feel passionate about in your business?
Oh, that's a question. Is it something? Yeah, the relatability. Absolutely, Pete. As you were mentioning, honor, honesty, integrity, courage. All that came to my mind was in recruit school, standing there under the banners going, just like yelling out those things.
Yeah.
So, bringing that into the business world, I think it's, I thought about this earlier actually, Pete, is that I think there's a lot of things that ex-service personnel do who become business owners or a part of running a business or whatever it may be. And is that there's probably a lot of things that we do that just seem normal to us that we don't really necessarily give credit or association with being in the military. And so, like the application of how that comes into the business world is, from my experience, I'm only just starting to sort of identify, and after having more conversations with other veteran business owners, and very sparingly at the moment, but I look forward to having more of them, is that I think like one thing I said earlier is like, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late.
Yeah.
And like my partner is also ex-military as well. And he's got the same principle behind, like, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. And I've said it to civilians. They're like, what? I'm like, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're fucking late. Like, where are you, kind of thing. But, that joke aside, is what sort of elements do we bring from that experience into the business world? I think there's a sense of focus. I think that there's a sense of, let's get this shit done. Let's not fuck around. My sailorness is coming out in me now. I gotta keep it.
We've got a little E on we've got a little E in a box on our podcast. So explicit.
So explicit. Yeah, I am being tame. So there's like all these different components of structure, order, systems that come into play that we apply into business.
Yeah.
So it's the order coming through. And it's funny because I'm also a creative as well. So there's like this conflict of being super, super structured, but needing to be super flexible as well. And so bringing those and marrying that into a business sense has been really beneficial to acknowledge.
I think for me is this desire to succeed and also a desire to do the right job. I get a level of anxiousness or a level of, great personal discomfort if we're not operating on an elite level for our customers and doing, the best job possible. I think,
attention to detail.
yeah, and it's something that if something that we're about to deliver is just not on the mark, it's that thing, like I was always someone that lived in an almost state of perpetual fear in the military of letting people down or turning up late or, and that same thing is definitely carried across in terms of trying to do a great job. So I think when you're looking to procure, I'm a champion of veteran procurement, because if you want someone they might not, this is a bit of a funny saying, but when you engage a veteran business owner, they may not be the best, but they will do their best. And this is a really important thing, because do you want a company that is going to be satisfied with doing substandard work to slip it through and then fix it up later? But I'm yet to meet a veteran community business owner that doesn't give their best. And when you get that into your supply chain partner business relationship system, it's super powerful.
Yeah, and to tack onto that, Pete, that precision that goes into the production, and from my business experience, is that there's so much attention to detail. There's measurements, measure twice, cut once. It doesn't get sent out unless it's right. Or if it gets sent out and there's a mistake, it's like there's full ownership of that, taking responsibility to rectify that. Like the importance of clear communication is definitely one of those things that come into play. Like always be communicating.
But your sorcery is a deliberate process as well. Is that you've been able to capture what makes your business special by applying structure and process and consistency, because you know that by following those steps, you're going to understand what the client needs to give them the great product at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And through to the double check of an address before sending it out to the client, because they could have moved. They could have changed office. They could have done this. They could have done that. And so taking that key step measure is absolutely necessary in the process that we take to make sure it gets to the client.
Be brilliant at the basics. You get that right, and then you basically, you're 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
Nat, tell us, how do we get in touch with Willow's branding? If you want uniforms done, what kind of uniforms, fit your mold? Who needs to come and see you for their branding and uniform needs?
So we cater from one-man bands up until corporate entities. Ultimately, it depends on, do you want quality, clear communication, and a badass service where you don't mind a little bit of swearing?
Yeah.
And do you want to take your existing presentation to a level of consistency? Then, we may be a good fit. We're not for everyone. We go through that process of, if you're willing to spend the time at the start to get it right, and then have a reliable communication and supplier from there on in, then we're the people for you.
Well, practicing what we preach, we're going to use Willow's branding for our apparel needs, to be able to share our image and to be able to get who we are out onto the uniforms, to be able to build a sense of team and build a sense of connection and a sense of pride in terms of who we are as a business. So having started the process with Nat and the Willow's team, absolutely recommend get in touch with them. Nat, this is number one. Thanks for being a little bit vulnerable and talking about a few things here. It's I hope I didn't press too many buttons in terms of But I appreciate you being honest and sharing, because you are absolutely not alone. And I would suggest you're probably in the majority rather than the minority, in terms of how people feel about their veteranness and their connection to military service.
I appreciate your time to have me on here, Pete. And it is definitely an honor to step up and out and own the fact that, it was a part of my life and it continues to be a part of my life in a different way. And to be able to share that with other people who may feel the same. And not alone in that process. So let's keep
So
on connecting.
how do we get in touch with you and Willow's branding? Throw us a plug.
So just go to www.willowsbranding.com and then there's a link to connect with us on there.
Perfect.
Or on LinkedIn under Nat Koko, NATKOKO.
No worries. Well, we'll throw those in the show notes for everyone. Thanks for joining today, Nat, and thanks for everyone for listening to Military Mindset for Business. Do that click, like, share thing. It always helps us out, and we're here to help you out. Pete Liston, out.